Hello and welcome to the Santa Clarita Valley Signal News Podcast. I'm your host, Aron Bender. Please subscribe to the podcast, turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. A closer look at some of the stories making news this week in the SCV. Managing editor Perry Smith joins me to talk the return of summer camps, a lack of a pandemic baby boom, an update on last week's murder in Saugus, and Westfield dropping plans to put a Costco at the mall.
I know many children probably grew up in the Santa Clarita Valley dreaming of one day being able to say, no, I want to go to the good Costco. And like that, it was shattered. No, I was talking to, we got the word right before deadline, of course, as always, the other day. And the city was very upset because it's $100 million of investment that had just kind of gradually been chipped away by this pandemic, which certainly made sense in light of the retail market shifting. But we had been told, and so had the city, apparently, that it was still going to go through. And Westfield viewed LA County as kind of one of its capital markets, and that those places would still have the investment coming. And they would still, like, there was projects like the Woodland Hills Westfield location recently just finished a whole bunch. If you've been out there recently, and that was part of the plan for here. And that was the city's impression up until about last week, apparently. So that was pretty crazy to hear.
What was Westfield's explanation?
Well, they announced it back in February, but we didn't really get an answer as to why the delay in letting people know, because the speculation had been since February that this has to do with the sell-off, and that because they're going to be looking to sell all of these physical assets, that they're probably, that could affect that. But we were told, no, it's not. And, when it came time, we didn't really fully get an explanation. But I think it's in logically terms, it has to do with their reorganization. And you don't want to announce if you're going to sell a property that you need to sell a property, because then you lose, some of the some of that leverage. So I assume that was part of it, but again, with them declining to comment, we can only assume.
Explain to me the Scorpion move. Scorpion, one of Santa Clarita's largest employers, like 600 workers.
Well, from what I understand, and again, it has to do more with California being a less competitive business environment than where they're moving to, which is in Utah. And if you have so many people working remotely, then you can consider your headquarters moved, even though you might still have the building. I think it's also going to be one of those situations where it doesn't make sense for them to have such a large footprint here if it's not going to be their headquarters. And again, with real estate being at a premium and those needs shifting, I can't imagine that they hang on to that building. But I don't have any indication officially that they're going to sell or move, just what we've been reporting so far. So it's just kind of like, you see the writing on the wall with the Westfield, and then, when they say that, you take it at face value. But when things change, you understand why. It's not that big of a surprise. Do you envision any of that Westfield property? And this is not your reporting. This is just you and I are a couple of Santa Claritans talking over a couple of beers is all we're doing. I can see a development or two fitting in to where there are right now just gigantic parking lots surrounding empty buildings. And what you can do is build a little higher than anywhere else, maybe in that area, because you had the Sears there. So I think one of the things you might be looking at, which the city is kind of tentatively acknowledged, because we heard that from Westfield, is that they're going to look to build some sort of mixed use real estate kind of, maybe like if you look at some of the areas like Pasadena, or what they even did in downtown Newhall, where you have the, the retail places right below some really nice apartments. It's a great opportunity to put some, and it's right next to the 5 freeway. So it's pretty prime real estate. I can't imagine that it's going to stay what it is. Let's talk about downtown Newhall, because they have had quite the makeover. Yeah, no, the city from about, I want to say, mid to late 90s have done a tremendous amount of work and planning on the redevelopment there. And there were state dollars that went away a few years ago, which helped make some of that possible. And I know the city's real proud of that, with the library and how it's kind of built it up as like a place. And that type of thing is, again, I think what they'd like to duplicate in that Valencia area. It would make a lot of sense, make it a little more walkable, and again, just more connected. Last week, I talked with Caleb about what had just taken place, a murder just north of the Grace Baptist Church area. By the time the podcast aired,
the suspect had been arrested. What's the latest in that case?
So right now, what we were tracking this week was kind of the presentation of charges. What's going on? There's been some dispute, and it was actually lent itself to some real interesting stories and a pretty rare conflict. We don't hear very often investigators willing to criticize the district attorney's office or to question their motives and moves. But that happened this week with respect to the special allegations and the sentencing enhancements that the detectives wanted to seek against the suspect, Matthew James Dorsey, in this particular case, just because they thought they could prove the allegations. And then when we spoke with the district attorney's office, they very much cited their policy initiatives from December, which have said we're not going to seek any sentencing enhancements, any special allegations, So they said, we asked them for a comment as to why, because, just because there are rules doesn't mean there can't be an exception or a circumstance where you might seek that out. And when pressured earlier, the DA's office had acknowledged as much, but they weren't willing to comment on this particular case.
I do want to ask you, next week we have a discussion about Hart High's mascot.
For the mascot, for those unaware, I guess during the BLM kind of protests and situation that we had during the summer, that spurred the discussion and another look, which has happened several times over the decades, of the Indian mascot. Obviously, there's a few, and especially in recent times, that we've been kind of looking at some of the things historically that are now considered, offensive and or even racist. And to that respect, they had they had someone from the Hart District come in and talk about the history of how they've tried to address the sensitivities. And then they had someone from the Tatavian tribe who came in and was like, I understand that, respect that, but it's not enough. And this is why it needs to be changed. And so with that, they also put it to the staff and the students, and those who participated, a majority, which ended up, only being about a third of the entire population, definitely did favor keeping it as the way it is. But there's still going to be more discussion. In that poll, and that survey was by no means just the end all. It was just kind of another look at how the community feels.
Coming up in the Sunday Signal, we take a look at summer camps. There's
a wide range of options for parents, Aaron, and depending on what you're comfortable with, your children being around or being exposed to, or what environments that they're, it's right for them or healthy for them, for their situation, there's probably an option for them, regardless of whether it's, close. The photos that we saw of Camp Clarita, it looked like the kids were interacting pretty well, and they were, there was masking and precautions being taken, but they were, outside and playing around and having fun, and it looked like summer camp. Again, brought back the memories.
And
but it's just, we try to put that information out there for parents and try to let them know.
Also in the Sunday Signal is the idea that we were expecting a baby boom because of the pandemic. You've got moms and dads at home all the time, and hey, 9, 10, 11 months later, let's have some babies, but not so much, not quite, not so fast.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things, Caleb did a nice job with that, of talking to some sociologists and getting an academic perspective. When there is the looming pandemic or that concern about it, there's also, if we bring a baby into this environment type of talk and concerns. And a lot of folks were, had lost their jobs, or, which also makes you less likely to go ahead and want to bring another child into the world. So due to those factors, there was kind of actually a recession, I guess you could say, in births last year, which was kind of interesting. And we looked a little bit about what that means going forward. And the upside of things, though, is that we are seeing, situations ready for a quick rebound, and people ready to spend again, and people ready to go out again. And, money's still relatively available with interest rates. So it might not be that long term.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So
have you dined in at a place yet?
We have a couple times with the in-laws. They're vaccinated.
Yeah. How did it go?
Luckily. So it went well. It's a little different. It's a little less crowded than it used to be. It's a little quieter. So I think you become a little more self-conscious, maybe of the volumes. I noticed when you're having a conversation.
Oh, that's right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things I noticed. But it's a little bit different, but it's nice to be back in to get that sense of normalcy again, which was really, really nice. And especially to be able to sit down and eat outside the home.
Yeah. Perry, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. Aaron, thank you again for having me on.
For these stories and more, head over to signalscv.com. Email me story or guest ideas at abender@signalscv.com and connect with me on social media at aronbender.com. Thanks for listening. Be well.